Please help me welcome to the stage author and ex-Googler, Sarah Cooper.
Thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate that. Please, everyone, give a round of applause to Alan. Thank you for organizing this. This was great. I live in San Francisco, so I flew in just for this, and he was able to organize everything kind of while I wasn't really here. So, and I appreciate you guys all for coming. This is a real honor for me. I was here at Google for almost 4 years, and I saw some amazing authors. I saw Maya Angelou. I saw Stephen Colbert when he was here. So to be able to do this is like a real honor for me. So I was the UX lead and manager for Google Docs, and this Friday it will be exactly 2 years and 2 weeks since I left. And I still remember the first thing that my manager said to me when I said I wanted to leave to pursue a career in writing. He said, "Do you have a book deal?" And I said, "Nope." But I think without realizing it, he gave me a goal to sort of work towards after I left. And I'm very excited to, announce that 3 weeks ago, my very first book did come out, 100 Tricks to Appear Smart in Meetings, and that's why we're all here today. So I'm going to talk to you about where the book came from, the path that led me to create it, some things that I've learned since leaving Google, and of course, I'll be teaching you how to look smart in meetings because that's very important. And I will have time for Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions while I'm talking, just make a note of it, and we can get to that at the end. So the story starts about 9 years ago, actually. My first job in tech was at Yahoo, and I sat in a meeting. It was a pretty normal meeting, pretty boring meeting. But then in one moment, a product manager got up from the table, went up to the whiteboard, and started drawing something. And everyone was silent, watching what he was putting up on the whiteboard. And it turned out to be a Venn diagram. And this Venn diagram was sort of related to what we were talking about, but really it made no sense. But instead of anybody saying, "Hey, this is unrelated and you're wasting time," or laughing at him, something really peculiar happened. People started to help him draw the Venn diagram and say, "Oh, make this circle bigger," or "make this one smaller," or "maybe we should change the labels." And I was fascinated as this product manager handed the marker to someone else, sat back down at the table, and went back to working on his laptop while everyone else obsessed over this Venn diagram. And I thought to myself, wow, that was a pretty cool stunt. And it actually made him look pretty smart. So I made a note of it. How to look smart in a meeting, draw a Venn diagram. And this isn't the exact Venn diagram that he drew, but it was just as ridiculous as this Venn diagram. Now, I didn't do anything with this scribble for a long time. In fact, it was 7 years later that I came across it by accident, going through some old boxes. And I said to myself, this is really funny. And it reignited this idea in my head of these quick ways you can look smart in a meeting. And at the point that I came across this, I had been at Google for almost 3 years. And so I was going to a lot of meetings, and without really articulating it to myself, I knew that looking smart in meetings was a pretty important part of my job. And I knew that when I went to a meeting and it was really awkward and everybody was sort of feeling self-conscious, if I said something that made me look really insightful or something that everyone agreed with, I would replay that moment in my head for hours, if not days afterward. And I would feel really, really good about it. And so I was like, what's that? What if that's the point of my whole career, just to go to meetings and look smart in them? So I decided to finish this list of things because I was continually trying to observe the people that were the smart ones in the meeting and figuring out what they did. So that turned into this blog post, which I posted on Medium, 10 Tricks to Appear Smart in Meetings. How many of you guys actually saw this original post? Cool. So some of these will be familiar to you. So some of these tricks that I had observed was translate percentages into fractions. And I actually saw someone do this. I've never successfully done it myself, but someone was presenting a metric and said, oh, it's what 25% of people clicked on this button. And someone chimed in with, oh, about 1 in 4, and made a note of it. And I could tell everyone was really impressed with that person's quick math skills. So I thought that's a great way to look smart. Another one, which I did a lot actually, was encourage everyone to take a step back. You know, when everybody's chiming in and ideas are being thrown out and the meeting is sort of getting out of control, say, guys, can we take a step back here? And then when you have everyone's attention, say, what problem are we really trying to solve? And everyone will kind of see you as the person who is able to get hold of the meeting again, even though maybe you weren't paying attention at all. In fact, a lot of times you probably weren't. Another one, ask, will this scale, no matter what it is. No one even really knows what that means, but it's a good catch-all question. It drives engineers nuts, and so it's a great way to appear smart. Ask the presenter to go back a slide. It doesn't matter where you yell this out. It will immediately make you look like you noticed something on that slide that everyone else missed. And you can just look at the slide for a little while, stare at it, nod, and then say, okay, we can move on. And everyone will think that you're really paying much closer attention than everyone else is. So I posted this, and a lot of people saw it. And I get this question all the time, were you scared to post this while you were at Google? And I was. I was scared to post it because I was scared people would think I was making fun of them, which I was. So I was a little worried that people would see it and see themselves and realize, oh, I do that. But turns out everybody I work with has a really great sense of humor. In fact, a few weeks after the post came out, I was in a meeting with one of our VPs, and he was pacing and asking the presenter to go back a slide at the same time. That's how you become a VP at Google, is you do these simultaneously. And when he was asking the presenter to go back a slide, he looked over at me and he winked. And so I knew that he got the joke, and so I didn't feel as scared anymore. I didn't expect the post to do as well as it did. It had over 100,000 views within a few days. It had 1 million views within a few weeks, and I think it's up to over 3 million views at this point. And I did absolutely nothing to really promote it. It just sort of took off on its own. And I think the success of it is really what gave me the confidence to pursue writing, because I'd been doing a lot of things in comedy and performing and stuff, but nothing had ever really resonated with people as much as this did. But it wasn't sort of an overnight thing. It was something that I'd been sort of pursuing for a long time. In fact, before I joined Google, I was pursuing my childhood dream of being an actress while I was doing freelance design. And I was auditioning for commercials and films and taking classes, and I was failing really, really badly at it. And it occurred to me while I was not succeeding at acting that the thing that made me a good designer made me a pretty horrible actress. And it was kind of my obsession with being perfect. And anybody here who's sort of tried to be artistic or do some kind of artistic endeavor will recognize this. As a designer, you want things to be perfect. You want pixel perfection. You want a user to see what you've done and know how the interface is going to work. You want them to click on something, and when something happens, that you want that to be an expected thing. And so they know how to use what you've designed. When it comes to art and when it comes to acting, perfection isn't interesting. And so, you know, if you have someone that's very stiff, which is what I was, no one really wants to watch that. People want to see something that's messy, that's, you know, surprising and that you really can't predict what's going to happen. And that's what's the most interesting about the most interesting actors, is that you love watching them because you have no idea what's going to happen. And I would get this feedback. People would say, I love, talking to you. You're so animated and you're so, engaging. But then when you get on stage or when you try to say a line, you're very stiff and you're very robotic. And it was really, really frustrating to me. So I tried a bunch of different things. And then there was one last thing that I hadn't tried, and that was stand-up comedy. I thought to myself, if I could get on stage and be myself in front of an audience with my own words, that it would help me relax and be more of a better actress. So I signed up for an open mic. I drank like 6 beers. I got up there, and I was up there for 8 minutes, and I just loved it. It was scary, but it was really, really exciting. And although it took me a long time to admit it and kind of let go of this childhood dream that I had for so long, I actually really liked being myself a lot more than I liked trying to be a different character. I was just sort of coming to terms with that when I looked at my credit card bill and realized I was $20,000 in debt after trying to pursue this dream and not really making any money with it. So that's when I contacted someone who worked at Google, who I went to school with, and she referred me for an interview here. And people make this joke all the time. They're like, oh, so you were an actor, but your fallback job was Google? And yeah, this was my fallback career, basically, which I'm so blessed and grateful that my fallback career was to work at the best company in the world with some of the best people that I've ever met. So I took the job, and it was bittersweet accepting it because I felt like I was giving up my dream again. But lucky for me, the people that I worked with were really supportive, and so I continued to do stand-up while I was here. In fact, there might be some people in the audience who've seen me do stand-up before, because all my coworkers would come to my shows and support me, and they were the reason that I was able to actually perform, because in New York, to perform stand-up, you have to bring people to watch you. And so it's kind of like pay to play. It's like a pay to play for stand-up comedy. And so it was really cool for me to be able to work at Google and support myself while also pursuing writing and comedy. And one thing that I really, really enjoyed about working here is that everyone here had something else that they were passionate about. This is sort of an example of an exercise that I did with my team at a team building exercise where we traced the path of what brought us to Google. And I was, sort of embarrassed of my path because it's kind of all over the place. I was born in Jamaica. I moved to Maryland. I got an economics degree because my parents were like, no, theater's not going to support you. I got a graduate degree in digital design in Atlanta. I became an art director and a creative director at an ad agency. I was a designer at Yahoo. I tried product management for a little bit. That did not work out. I did freelance design while acting. And then I came to Google as a designer and then became a manager. And for me, this was like, oh, it's really all over the place. I'm doing this, and then I'm going over here, and I'm kind of ping-ponging back and forth, and I'm not really sure where it is I'm supposed to be focusing. But then when I looked around the room at everyone else's path during this team building exercise, everyone had kind of an interesting way that they got here, and everyone had a thing that they were passionate about outside of work, whether it was music or crafts or cooking or something else. And so it was really, really cool, and it was a really cool environment to be in because I felt like that was okay. It was okay that I had these other things that I was excited about outside of work. So I think the reason why the Post did so well is because I was finally writing about what I really, really knew. And it's a kind of cliche piece of advice, write what you know, but sometimes you don't know what you know, and I knew meetings. And so when I wrote this, I think it just resonated with people because it was just being honest. Now, the original idea for the book wasn't to be an entire book about meetings. I wanted to do something more like Conquering Corporate America, where I talked about different aspects of office life. But then a coworker here at Google actually said, you know what, I bet you could write an entire book about meetings. And I kind of took that as a challenge. And when I started thinking about the different kinds of meetings there are, from brainstorming meetings to one-on-one meetings to team building meetings, to business dinners, to conference calls, to all these different kinds of meetings, it started to become a little bit easier thinking about all the tricks that people do in all of these different situations to look smart or look like they know what they're doing when they might not have any clue. So I'm going to go through a few of these tricks just as a preview of the book. So a great way to look smart in a one-on-one meeting is to suggest a walking meeting. If your coworker wants to chat with you, it's always great to suggest a walking meeting. Say you enjoy walking meetings because they clear your mind, just like they did for Steve Jobs. In conference calls, ask everyone who isn't talking to put themselves on mute. Everyone hates background noise, but only true business leaders have the guts to get rid of it. Interrupt whoever is talking and ask, where's that noise coming from? Follow up with, if you're not speaking right now, could you please mute yourself? Now, the call will be smoother and quieter, due in no small part to your executive leadership skills. In status meetings, interrupt someone's update, then let them finish, also known as the Kanye. If someone is giving an update on a project, interrupt him and let everyone know how important this update is. Then ask the person to continue. This establishes your dominance over the meeting. And for presentations, say, that's a great question before you avoid each question. Besides being a great way to stall until you can think of a way to avoid the question, complimenting the asker makes you look like a generous presenter. After you comment on how great the question is, no one will even notice when you say something like, you'll see the answer if you just keep listening, or let me address that at the end, or let's follow up about that offline. Brainstorming meetings, when everyone seems to like an idea, yell out, ship it. There comes a point when everyone seems to be really excited about an idea or direction. At this point, you should try to be the first person to yell out, ship it. Sure, it's a funny thing to say that will make people laugh, but doing this will also convey some authority on your part to both end the meeting and make a final decision, even though you have no power to do either. A lot of people ask me where these observations came from and kind of what really inspired me to do them. There's a few other sections of the book that'll help me kind of talk about this. One section is called 23 Meaningless Diagrams to Draw on the Whiteboard. And we have some examples here. And I think part of the thing that inspires me is, as an immigrant coming to this country, you know, you're always sort of trying to figure out how you can fit in. And you look at things kind of from an outside perspective in terms of, what are the rules here? Like, what are the rules, and how do people act in a way that makes people respect them? And so I always noticed that when someone would go up to the whiteboard, everyone would really give them a lot of attention, and they would sort of have the floor. And so that was part of the inspiration here, was just the fact of feeling like an outsider and trying to figure out how to fit in a lot of these situations. Another section is what to do with your face, which is something I always struggle with, because if I'm confused, you could see it on my face always. But this I think comes a lot from my interest in acting. I'm always interested in, you know, how people express extreme emotions, and, you know, it's very fascinating to me in documentaries or in news stories, you know, what people do to show that they're surprised, or show that they're sad, or show that they're angry. And in meetings, you got to look interested. You got to look interested or excited, or you got to look pensive, or whatever it is. And so a lot of times I'd be sort of fascinated with, what's the correct emotion to be showing in this situation? And so there's a ton of different faces in the book that you can make in case you run out of faces to make. And then subtext. So there's a meeting speak cheat sheet. Sometimes when you say things in an office environment, you don't actually mean what you're saying. And a lot of these were sort of me observing myself. Like, sometimes I'd be like, oh, definitely. But I know in my head I meant probably not. So some of these are kind of the observations of things that I would say, or people would say. Like, someone says, let's table that. It really means that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And so there's a bunch of different things like that. And so subtext is really important in acting, because you're never actually saying exactly what you mean. You usually mean something different. And this has really taken form in a lot of the other work that I've done. I did a whole post about New York City versus San Francisco, and this is one of the posts here, kind of showing the differences between the two. In New York City, someone will look rich, but they have no money. In San Francisco, they look poor, but they're probably a millionaire. And so that's, again, an observation that I make just from looking around and kind of really just being honest about those observations. This is another post on my website, Non-Threatening Leadership Strategies for Women, which is just making fun of the fact that as women in the workplace, we often have to soften the way that we say things. And this is kind of an example from email. Send me the presentation when it's ready. Might seem a little bit too jarring. So, hey, Jake, smiley face. Can I take a peek at your presentation when it's ready? Smiley face, thanks. You know, smiley face, smiley face. So that's, again, with subtext of just like, you know, a lot of times as women, we feel like we can't be as direct as we want to be. And even sometimes men feel like they can't be as direct as they want to be because everyone has to be very, very polite. And another thing of just observing myself, I wrote The People Pleaser's Guide to Pleasing People, which is something that I always felt like in an office environment, you had to sort of put on a very happy face, even if you weren't that happy or weren't that excited. And so I kind of bring that to light in this post as well. And all of these are on my website if you want to check the rest of them out. So since leaving Google, I've learned a few things and just wanted to share a few of those things with you. The first thing is try everything. If there's something that you are interested in, such as comedy or whatever it might be, I think for me, I didn't know what the tool was that was really going to help me bring that out and help me discover that in myself the most. And so I just tried everything. And there's so many different ways that you can express yourself, from drawing to writing to podcasts to videos to pretty much anything. And so trying everything, I think, is really important to finding the thing that's going to help you express yourself. The other thing that I really learned after leaving was wherever you go, there you are, which I didn't write, but it's really an important and true statement. A lot of the things that problems that I ran into as a Googler, such as not speaking up in meetings or not really putting myself out there, I'd often say, oh, well, it's just because of this situation or this person or whatever it was. But after leaving, I realized that was not the case at all. That's just who I am, and that's something that I have to deal with no matter where I go. Putting myself out there is hard for me. And so that's something that I learned is that, you know, no matter what situation you're in, the thing that you're dealing with is something that you probably have to deal with no matter what. And the biggest thing that I learned is don't throw away your old notebooks, because there might be some random scribble in there that turns into some crazy idea, that turns into a blog post, that turns into a book. So with that, thank you. And now we'll take questions. This is why I told everyone to think of questions beforehand, so there wouldn't be 10 seconds of awkward silence. Sort of. Oh, I think you have to go. Oh, sorry. Oh, well. Yeah.
Okay. Putting myself out there. Hi, I'm Irina.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. What if everyone reads your book and starts doing this in meetings? What does that kind of world look like?
Hell, yeah. A lot of the...
That would be scaling it, right?
Yeah, that would be like, the horror of scaling. I think a lot of people read it and say, I know someone who does this, or sometimes I've done things like this. If you look at these things and then you do them on purpose, I think that's when things sort of fall apart. A lot of the things that people do in meetings are sort of natural, and the things that I observed, they weren't doing them to look smart. They just kind of did them. And then I think other people, like me, imitated those people, and then they became not as helpful as maybe they were when they were first done by that first person. And so a lot of the advice that I give in the book is kind of like, don't do this. It's like the opposite. Do the opposite of this. And that's kind of the risk of writing satire, is that people will take it seriously. And the initial article, a lot of people were very offended by it because they felt like to look smart, you need to listen and contribute. And obviously, you need to listen and contribute. I mean, duh, but that wouldn't be a very interesting book, right? So but for me, I love satire, and so the whole point of it is told in a very serious tone, but it's not serious at all. So it's like, do the opposite of it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah, for giving us the inspiration and pursuing our goals
Thank you.
and our dreams. What's your next book going to be about?
Oh, you sound like my publisher. I am still working on it, so it probably will be illustrated again, and probably lots of different ideas from my website. So I might be putting together some ideas from the most popular posts that I've had on my website. That's one idea. But it will be sort of in the same vein of satire and humor. Yeah.
By the way, the illustrations are great. Did you do it yourself?
Yes, I did. I don't know how to draw, and so, but I really wanted to create visual content, and so I have this horrible hack where I trace photos. And so the original post was actually tracings of stock photos, of really, really cheesy stock photos of people in meetings, like, looking like they're interested. And then for the book, I got my husband and 2 friends to pose like they were in meetings. And I took pictures of them and I traced them. And so that's how I do the illustrations.
Thanks. Hi, Sarah. I'm Ali. And I've been following, I guess, your life through Google and after through your blog. So my question is, I'm sure that it took a lot of guts to leave Google and the security that comes with it. But now that you've been through this process, do you think that the time that now you have on your hand is an essential part of your creativity? And whether, I guess my question is, as far as time management goes, would you have been able to do this had you not left Google? And yeah, so in that vein, whatever you have to say.
I think that I left Google a little too early. I think that I could have continued to write and do a lot of things that I was doing while I was still at Google. And interestingly enough, having a full-time job kind of takes the pressure off of the creative things you're doing. I felt very panicked after I left Google that I wasn't making money and I wasn't being successful, and so it put a lot of pressure on the creative side that I didn't have before when I was working at Google. And so it's hard to be creative when you feel like you're under the gun and you have to make it work or else. So I think I would have given myself a little more time to really get the book deal and get things going, and I think eventually I would have had to leave. But I think there's a lot more that I could have done while I was still here.
So when you say eventually you've had to leave, that kind of means that you think it's really not consistent to be in a corporate world and to be fully creative.
Yeah, I think that there was an aspect of feeling like I was leading a double life. Like even when I posted the initial post and I was like going into work like, oh God, who saw that I wrote that? Like for me it felt uncomfortable, especially leading a team. I felt like, oh, well, I had this other thing that's really taking a lot of my passion away now from what I was doing. And so I think eventually I would have gotten to that point where I just couldn't live both of those lives. That being said, there was so much good material here at Google that I wish I could still be around it. And so for that, I feel like now I have to reach a lot harder to go and find that inspiration versus being around it all day. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess in an attempt to appear smart, I'll say he stole my question. That was basically the same thing. So thanks for answering.
Oh, sure. Hey, no problem.
Hi. So I almost wonder if the title of this could be 100 Tricks to Appear Smarter in Google Meetings.
Yeah.
Do you, having worked in other places previously, but given that the kind of content of this was derived from your experience here at Google, I assume, do you feel like this exists to the same extent outside of Google in other corporate settings, or less or more so?
There are a few things that I wanted to put in this book that my publisher didn't think would work, like video conferencing is huge here, but apparently the rest of the world really doesn't do as much video conferencing as we do here. And so that chapter got changed to conference calls, which we never do conference calls here. So that was kind of, I had to ask a lot of friends for advice on that chapter. But it's interesting in terms of the people that find my website and write to me and say that this really resonates with them. The most surprising people are people that have left the workforce and weren't in tech at all. They have been out of the workforce for a decade, and a lot of this still resonates with them, which is scary because it means that we're all still doing the same things in these environments that were done many years ago. And I think it's just some aspect of being in a workplace and being in these environments that kind of makes us all sort of put on a bit of a mask, and it makes all of the rest of us sort of be respective of that mask. And so it's a little bit passive aggressive, like no matter where you go, whether you're in tech or anywhere else, there's a little bit of a performance that we're all sort of putting on. And so I think that I tried to in the book, like be as true to that as I possibly could so that people outside of tech would get it. But I still do get the feedback that people at Google and Facebook and other places like that really get it a lot more than other people. That's just gonna happen. Hi.
Hello there. So I've heard some people at Google with a real anti-meeting bent, like let's cancel meetings if they're not useful or walk out if you're not finding it useful.
That's in the book, actually. That's a trick to look smart.
So I guess
Too many meetings.
with all these meetings and all these masks, do you still walk away feeling that that meetings, we're doing them at the right level, or they're being done too much or too little?
I think I worked briefly at a co-working space in San Francisco, and I noticed that a lot of the startups were all on Slack, and so they were really they really weren't meeting very much at all. They were really just communicating. So I think it seems like people are having less meetings, which I'm not sure it's a good thing, just because a lot of times you just need to be face-to-face in order to get stuff done. And so I don't know the answer to that question, because I also have this chart in here that's like sometimes you have to meet face-to-face, but then sometimes when you meet face-to-face, you realize this could have been an email. And so it's kind of a catch-22 where you're not really sure what's the best way to solve a problem. So yeah, I have no idea. I know that on our team, we're thinking maybe we'll have no meeting Wednesdays, or maybe we'll have no meeting mornings, or no meeting afternoons, or something, and it never works. Like, people need to talk to each other. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but it's kind of a necessary evil, it seems like. It's also interesting because people hate and complain about meetings, but then if they're not invited to that one meeting, they're really, really annoyed that they weren't invited. So, and then you get there and you're like, why am I here? So that happens sometimes too. Any other questions? Okay. Where are you?
So will there be a 100 tricks to appear smart on Slack ever?
Not for me, because I don't use Slack. And that would be a lot of tricks for Slack, but thanks for the question.
So now that you're out of the corporate world, how will you get your inspiration?
Yeah, that's tough. My husband still works at Google, so he gives me some material sometimes. I'm also get some inspiration on LinkedIn because it's so cheesy, and the things people post on there is just so bad. So I kind of look around the internet a lot and sort of see what sparks a memory for me of being in this world, and that kind of gives me some inspiration. But I do think I'll have to move away from corporate humor eventually, just because it's not really my life anymore. Okay, all right. Thank you guys so much for coming.